Good evening. Everyone doing okay? Getting good to eat and drink? How about a toast for the band real quick? Cheers to the band. Haven't even gotten warmed up yet. It's going to get really good. First of all, before I say any of my prepared remarks, which will be no longer than 16 minutes, so don't worry, it's not going to be that bad. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you to everyone for coming. Each of you are here is really special to Brian and Jesse. Special thanks to the grandparents, to Bibi, and to my mom's parents, Mac and Betty, Nana and Papa. Thank you for coming. They've seen more than a couple weddings, and they did a great job in coming out, so thanks to you. Also, special thanks to Jim Gash, who did the wedding. He did a great job. He didn't cry the whole time. We were all taking bets on when he would start crying, and I think we all lost, actually. So that's good, and I think that's better for everyone because he did a great job, so thanks, Jim. Well, I'm Garrett. I'm the older, wiser twin, as George said. So when I found out Brian was dating Jessie and she was the younger twin, I said, well, good. If there's an older twin in the picture, then I'm sold. Whatever Jessie's about is secondary, because George is obviously a great guy. So I'd like to thank the prior toasters, my warm-up acts. You guys did a great job. I think the crowd is in a good mood now. I think y'all ready to laugh a little bit. So hopefully you won't throw me out after the next 15 minutes or so. And also, real quick, there are 5 sets of twins represented here tonight. I'm not sure if anyone knew that. My side of the family is kind of special in that we have 3 sets of boy twins, and then there's George and Jessie, and then Jessie and George have some family friends who are also twins. So this is a quick cheers to the twins. Yeah. No self-interest here at all. All right, so thinking about this toast, I'd like to start with 2 formative authorities in Brian's life. First one, I'm going to get serious here. I'm going to start with the Bible. So this was me and Brian's verse growing up. We would always tell this to each other when we were trying to manipulate something out of the other one. And it's from 1 John 2:10-11. The one who loves his brother abides in the light, and there is no cause for stumbling in him. But the one who hates his brother is in the darkness and walks in the darkness, and does not know where he is going, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. Right? So to all the twins here, I say, love your brother. All right, and for the second authority, I went to the wisest man Brian and I have ever met for some thoughts on marriage, and that'd be Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry Seinfeld, he's very funny, but he gave some very good remarks about marriage. He said, marriage is not a relationship, it's a musical, because you're always talking about your tone. And as you'll hear in a couple of minutes, Brian has pretty decent tone, so he should survive that one okay. Seinfeld also says marriage is like a game show because you're always in the lightning round with impossible questions to answer and hypothetical scenarios. Well, thankfully there's 2 lawyers here, they're both pretty sharp, so Brian might be able to hold his own. Time will tell, Jesse's really sharp. There's obviously much more to marriage than that, but the question is, why are we all here? And I think the answer to that comes from the opening song. It's, we're here for you, but the you is for Brian and Jesse. All right, a little bit about Brian, a little bit about Jesse, a little about them together, and then I'll sit down so we can start dancing. I've known Brian my whole life, and then some little extra, about 7.5 months BC. That's before C-section, so sorry, Mom. That was tough. But we did come out 6 weeks early, so I think we deserve a little bit of kudos for that. We could have stayed in the oven a little bit longer, but we can't. Brian David Fay was born on March 23rd, 1982, here in Santa Barbara. Not Goleta, and that date was really easy for me to remember because I was there. But the important thing is I'm older, that's why I'm the best man. So growing up, Brian and I did everything together. I have a little list here: school, sports, summer camps, bathing. That was kind of awkward, except for Nano and Heather were there also, so it wasn't quite as awkward. If you don't believe me, Debbie Gale has the pictures to prove it and would happily share them with you. Brian and I were pretty much inseparable until a couple years ago, when Brian did the unthinkable. Jim Gash mentioned this earlier, but Brian went to Fresno. And I appreciate you coming, thank you. And I know you're gonna have a great time in Santa Barbara, because it's at least 30 degrees cooler here. But the thing about Fresno was it really demonstrated, for me at least, for the first time, that brotherly love has its limits, and that limit is Bakersfield. So I only went up there 4 times to visit. Once when Brian moved in, once when Brian moved out, and there's 2 unfortunate circumstances in between that I choose not to remember. So, but then Brian came back. So it was fun having a twin. Growing up, we did everything together. Every environment was less threatening and more fun. And I think someone even wrote a song for us, just the two of us. Maybe, maybe not. It was comforting having a twin, and we were pretty much inseparable till Fresno. But so what about Brian? There's some things you know, some things you don't know. He's tall. He's got pretty good hair. He's pretty good looking. So he looks kind of like me. There's just one problem. We married into the George family. And George looks like a male model. And compared to George, we're kind of ugly ducklings, so thanks, George. So Brian did pretty well in school after college. He went and worked at the White House for a couple of years in the speechwriting office. But I want to make one thing really clear. Brian had nothing to do with President Bush's more creative deliveries, like when he says he was misunderestimated. The question that we all have to ask ourselves is our children learning? Now, Melissa and Annika were also in the speechwriting office. They're sitting right here. And the question is, where were you two when that happened? I'm not sure. Probably the same place as Brian, doing something more fun, like going to state dinners and rivals. So after law school, after undergrad, Brian went to DC, comes back, goes to law school, did pretty well, worked for Ken Starr, managed to absorb some of the more right-wing craziness. It was good, but here's what you may not know about Brian. Brian's first career aspiration, no joke, and some of you might know this, was to be a garbage man. Now I can't knock it because it was mine too. That phase lasted about 6 months until we decided, no, we can't do that. Our mom told us we have to buy her a beach house someday, and I've never seen a garbage man buying his mom a beach house. It might exist, but I haven't seen it. Growing up, Brian was a really good goalie and catcher. The baseball coaches called him Wheels, but it wasn't because he was fast. He's also pretty competitive. Our Uncle Steve used to put on a triathlon in Catalina. When we were younger, Brian actually cheated during the bike portion and beat me by a couple minutes. And I'm still trying to get over it. I'm not quite there yet. And Brian's kind of a Renaissance man. He plays the sax and guitar. And as you'll hear for their first dance song, he wrote and recorded that. And he excels at ping pong, karaoke, and Scrabble, which is sort of the yuppie trinity of activities. All right, so this is all good about Brian. Some of you are wondering, yeah, all this positive stuff. Tell us some juicy, dirty stuff, because I've known him for a while. I'm the best man. 2 problems. Number 1, I can't tell you anything really incriminating because I was there too. And Tim and Nana were there also, so I'm not going to throw them down. And Nate Brock, who's sitting over here, works for the Santa Barbara Police Department. And I'm not sure the statute of limitations has run on our college escapades yet. Some of those carry a 10-year limit, and we're kind of on the edge there, so I'm not going to say anything too bad. So overall, in Brian land, life was good up until about a year and a half ago. But you come back from Fresno, you got a job in LA, CLA, CLS, all this was happening. But something, and more importantly, someone was missing. I think we all know who that is. Well, thankfully, last May, my parents went and got a new dog, Titus, and filled that void in our family. Because after Chloe died, we had a huge void. We needed another yellow lab, because you can't have no dog walking around. So we got a new dog, Titus. He made a short cameo in the film, but anyway. Now Jesse, this is the reason we're all here. When I first met Jesse, I was blown over. I'd always liked the girls Brian dated, including a prior blonde from Texas, but I knew they weren't the one. But when I met her, I was immediately impressed for 2 reasons. Obviously, she's a twin, that's great, but you have to understand the context of where CLA is. CLA is in East Hollywood. There's bars in the windows. There's an armed guard out front. And everyone who's there is there because their life has totally and utterly fallen apart. They can't afford an attorney. They can't afford housing. They can't afford childcare. They're there for services. So they're there to volunteer. And so you pull up this environment, it's awful. And you walk in and what do you see? You see a really loud, energetic blonde woman from Texas bossing people around. And you're like, wow. I mean, who wouldn't be impressed? I think I was, and I think some other guys here have tried to ask Jesse out at one time or another. Can we have a show of hands? Anyone want something up to that? I won't name any names, maybe later, but I'll leave that. So I met Jesse and I told Brian, I gave him the best advice I'd ever given him. I said, you need to ask her out. And what does Brian say? You think he's a really smart guy, right? No, he says no. Well, in this story, the important thing is that no means yes. So after dawdling for a couple months, he had nothing else to do. He was not dating anyone. So he finally asked musters the courage to ask her out. And Brian's a smart guy, so he does it in this really creative, extravagant, ornate way. What does he do? He calls her up on Tuesday morning at 8:30 and leaves a voicemail on her cell phone. Will you go out with me? Now, there are not many women in the world who might respect themselves who would say yes to that. Jesse's not part of that list. So Jesse said, how about no? Well, as we know, no means yes. Brian tried again, Jesse said yes. A little bit later, he asked again, she said a more important yes, and here we are. So, what have I seen? I can tell you I've truly never seen Brian more happy than he is around Jesse. But more than that, he's his best self around her. More loving, more joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, faithful, gentle, etc. You know where I'm going with that. I've also never seen Brian willingly eat quinoa or gluten-free brownies. Now here's the deal with the gluten and the brownies and the desserts. When you come from a partially Greek family where food equals love and you eat dessert every night, when you meet someone who says, I think you should have some quinoa or some gluten-free brownies, they might as well be speaking some language that doesn't exist on this earth. And Brian likes his desserts. He's gonna eat a lot of sheet cake later. If you just watch him, it'll be really entertaining. But that was hard. So I never seen him willingly do this stuff. I also never seen him willingly go line dancing. For those of you from the LA, Northern Ventura County area, there's a bar called Borderline, and it's solely right. It's a line dancing place. Brian would have been caught dead there for the first 30 years of his life, and then Jesse comes in, he says to her, hey babe, how about we go line dancing? Like I'm in the alternate universe here. That's the power of a strong Texas woman. And he's also turned into quite the romantic. He meticulously planned dates, an elaborate engagement, and I'm sure the honeymoon won't disappoint. And it better not because George and I are coming too.